This is a chart of America's upward mobility rates over the last 70 years. It tracks the percentage of people born in a given year who grow up to earn more than their parents. Back in 1945, this number was 90%, but it's been steadily falling, and today it sits at about 50%. In other words, for the first time in our history, Americans aren't doing better than the generation before them. The question that economists are trying to answer is why? And is there anything that we can do to reverse this trend? This is where Melissa Kearney comes in. She's a professor of economics at the University of Maryland and also the author of this book. Up until now, most of the research around the fall of the American dream is focused on some of the culprits you might already be thinking of. Things like the paper ceiling, new technology in the workplace, increasing globalization, the rise of executive pay, and gaps in our education and tax systems. But according to Kearney, we've been overlooking an important part of the equation, our relationships. Now, before we jump in, it's important to mention that her work looks at things purely from an economic lens, not a moral one. Relationships are inherently personal, and they're also tough to talk about. And as most of us know, they usually start and evolve with the best of intentions. But modern love looks really different than it did just a few decades ago, and the research shows that it's reshaping who gets ahead and who gets left behind in the American economy. Let's take a look back in time to understand how relationships have changed. Back in the year 1949, marriage rates hit an all-time high when married couples made up over 78% of all U.S. homes. Fast forward 80 years, and that number has gone down, way down. Today, it's less than half. It's the lowest rate ever recorded. While marriage has fallen, births outside of marriage have increased. Back in 1980, that number was less than 20%. Since then, that number has doubled and represents almost half of all kids born today. We know that relationships and the policies around them have evolved over the last few decades in some pretty meaningful and mostly positive ways. Marriage as an institution has become more inclusive and way less of a societal pressure. So it's natural to guess that while fewer people might be getting married on paper, they're still living and raising their kids together. But that's not what the data shows. In most cases, unmarried parents aren't cohabitating, and that means that far more children are growing up with only one parent in the home. In most cases, that parent is their mother. And here's why this matters. I know it's a little bit unromantic, but if we think of marriage as a kind of agreement to share both resources and responsibilities, we can start to paint a picture of the impact that single parenthood could have on a kid's life. There are the financial resources. Two parents under a single roof can share things like rent, utilities, and food, and they end up with a lower cost of living than two parents that are living apart. That frees up money to then spend on kids, on things like tutors, sports, and enrichment outside of public schools. But there's also the resource of time. Parents living together aren't just able to afford more, they're able to do more with the time that they have. Two parents can divide and conquer through a process that economists call specialization. In a two-parent home, this idea means that one person might manage schedules, meal planning, and shopping, while the other deals with things like insurance, maintenance, and bills. Each person specializes in a set of tasks, and then they're able to do them far more efficiently. Single parents, again, usually moms, have to deal with all of this work on their own. Data shows that both of these resource gaps, time and money, make a big impact on life outcomes. Kids with single parents are more likely to experience poverty. They're less likely to finish high school or college, and less likely to have a high-paying job when they're adults. They're also more likely to go to prison. So what's driving this change? To understand this shift, we have to unpack why fewer people are getting married, and to do that, we need to talk about who exactly is getting married, or not. As it turns out, the drop in marriage has not been universal. It's plummeted for women without a college degree, but remained steady for women with one. In America, a college degree is usually associated with higher earnings, and people generally marry at similar education and earning levels, making marriage a new kind of modern luxury. Kearney's research points to two main drivers behind the drop in marriage for these women. The first is what experts call a decline in marriageable men. The idea that without steady income, men aren't seen as marriage material. For decades, factory work was the backbone of working class stability in the US. These jobs almost never required a college degree, but they offered tremendous reliability, right? A steady paycheck, union benefits, and a kind of consistency that helped men be considered as potential husbands and partners. But starting in the 1970s, a surge of imports from China gutted US manufacturing, causing plants to shutter and leaving many many of the men employed by them without a source of income. Economists studied how these shifts reshaped family life. They wanted to investigate whether economic opportunity actually causes a change in marriage rates. The answer they found is yes. As imports killed off American manufacturing jobs, marriage rates dropped, single motherhood increased, and more children were living with their mothers in poverty. And during the same time that men's opportunities shrank, things for women got better. Between the years 1980 and 2010, women's wages increased by 20% relative to men. Women no longer needed men for financial survival, and marriage as a result became less appealing. But money isn't the only driver at play here. While modern events have mostly shifted blue-collar jobs away from the US, there are a few moments in recent history that have brought these types of jobs back, such as the fracking boom of the 2000s. And by looking at this moment in time, economists had a chance to explore whether the trends could be reversed. Essentially, is it possible to create more marriageable men by bringing back financial opportunities? And at first, the data seemed disappointing. Births went up, but marriage rates didn't really change as a result of the fracking boom. It looked like money wasn't enough to make men more marriageable after all. But when researchers dug deeper, they found something fascinating. The effects weren't actually the same everywhere. In places where marriage was already the norm, the fracking boom led to more kids being born into only two-parent families. In other places where single parenthood had become much more common, births still increased across the board, but they increased in equal amounts for single and married parents alike. So money mattered, but so did the culture of a place. The same economic opportunity played out in two completely different ways, depending on local norms. Essentially, as women opted out of marriage, that norm tended to stick around, even if financial circumstances changed in the future. We know that men without a college degree have been hit the hardest by shifts in our economy. The growth of men's and women's wages have diverged, and as men lost earning power, they also lost their appeal as partners, with many written out of the marriage market. But this story of divergence isn't just about money. It's also about how men and women develop differently, long before they ever enter the workforce. Even in childhood, boys and girls diverge on key predictors of success. Boys are more likely to act out in school and fall behind academically, and these early gaps set the stage for future challenges: lower graduation rates, fewer college degrees, and fewer paths to stable, well-paying jobs. Biology plays some role in this divergence. Boys' brains develop differently, and they tend to mature more slowly when it comes to what experts call soft skills, things like self-control, patience, grit, and conscientiousness. Research has shown that these skills are essential for succeeding in school, managing responsibilities, and holding down a stable job when you're an adult. But biology, or the nature side of things, isn't the entire story. There's a landmark study by two economists, Marianne Bertrand and Jessica Pan, and they wanted to know what role nurture played. What they found was that for boys, development of these soft skills is actually extremely sensitive to the time and attention that they get at home. When household resources and nurturing are limited, boys are more likely to carry that stress outside the house, misbehaving and getting into trouble at school and with the law. But by contrast, girls in similar environments don't show any notable difference in their behavior outside the home. They tend to be much more resilient. This combination of nature and nurture creates a compounding loop for boys. We talked about how marriage, at its core, is a way of pooling resources. The more there are, the better the outcomes. But because boys are especially sensitive to these resources, they're the ones who lose out the most when they're scarce. This creates a vicious cycle at the bottom of the economy. A loss of stable jobs has led to more unmarriageable men. Women aren't able to find reliable partners, so they raise kids on their own. But their boys, growing up with fewer resources and without a reliable dad at home, are more likely to stumble, and in turn, a new generation of unmarriageable men emerges. And so the cycle repeats. Meanwhile, the reverse happens at the top. High-earning parents continue to get married, combine resources, and give their kids a bigger head start. And so with each generation, inequality continues to widen. The fall of marriage in America over the last few decades has not been good, especially for lower-income families. But there are still ways to reverse this trend, and Kearney outlines a few policy-related areas that might be able to help. The first starts with improving job opportunities for low-income and less educated men. This doesn't have to be a return to manufacturing that caused this shift in the first place, but men need and deserve opportunities that give them the stability to be more reliable partners as both husbands and parents. The second is by increasing support for healthy co-parenting, with a particular focus on keeping dads involved, regardless of where they live or whether they're married to the mother of their kids. So many programs that are available today focus exclusively on single mothers, but this ends up just reinforcing the disproportionate amount of work that they already take on. The third is increasing support to kids and families from disadvantaged backgrounds. backgrounds through things like mentorship, better education, and reliable healthcare. These things have been shown to improve outcomes for disadvantaged kids and can help close essential resource gaps they might be experiencing at home. Growing up with two parents has become yet another luxury in life enjoyed disproportionately by the educated and the wealthy. It's a trend that both reflects and amplifies inequality in the US. And if we want to solve it, there will have to be major changes in both our economic and social arenas. If we don't, the American dream won't just slip further out of reach, it'll become something that only the wealthiest families can afford.